Hello, everybody. Tommy here, World at War Comics, and my next guest is Mr. David Avallone. He is a director, writer, storyteller extraordinaire, and he has written several different comic books over the years. But his latest title, coming out June 18th, is Red Sonja Noir, that you could find at all your comic book stores. So get out there and pick it up. You're going to love this interview. Cannot wait for you to enjoy it. Without further ado, here is David and I. Well, hello everyone. Welcome to World at War Comics. My next special guest, writer, director, actor, kind of do a little bit of everything, Mr. David Avallone. David, thank you so much for being with me today. It's a pleasure meeting you.
Nice to meet you too. Thanks for having me on, Tommy.
Absolutely. I'm really excited to talk about Red Sonja. I am a big Conan Red Sonja fan.
I can see
So
the
I got my
Conan in the
first,
background. Yeah.
yeah, I got my first issue of Red Sonja here. I got
Nice.
issue 23 and 24, first appearances. I'm really
Nice.
excited to talk about this one shot that is coming, I believe, June 18th, if I'm not mistaken.
Is that right? Yeah, I don't I knew it was mid to late June. I didn't have the exact date, but June 18th is great. That's soon.
Yeah, it's super excited from Dynamite Entertainment. And you've done quite a few things with Dynamite, but I would
Oh
love to
yes.
kind of go back into your history. You have obviously a very unique background from a very
Probably true.
amazing family of creators and writers. Can you kind of talk about where this passion for writing started in your life?
Sure. Well, I'll tell you, I mean, I grew up in a household with a novelist. My father was a writer from he got out of the army in 1945 and he went to work in a stationery store. He was from a family with 17 brothers and sisters, classic Italian immigrant family in the early 20th century. And I've always thought that the only place he could find privacy was in his own head. Like the only place he could ever be alone with his thoughts is literally writing them down. So I think that was probably where it started for him. And for me, growing up with that person, and my mother, I should mention, was a women's rights activist
Yep.
from when I was a kid on. She ran the Right to Choose in New Jersey. And that also, she wrote newsletters. She made public appearances. They both were very public facing people. I grew up thinking it was normal to see your parents in the newspaper when I was a kid, and I thought it was weird not to have that in your house. But they were great, amazing parents and great heroic figures to live up to, honestly. That said, I actually always thought of myself more as a filmmaker than a writer. And of course, it starts to occur to you when you hit, 18, 19, and you're going off to college, like, who's going to write the things that well, I don't want someone else writing the films that I want to make. I want them to be my stories. And, like everybody else, um, everybody starts with fan fiction. Everybody imitates before they do anything else. I think the first movie I ever wrote was a 40-page Star Wars movie that took place between uh the first movie between Star Wars and The Empire Strikes Back. I am old enough to call the first movie Star Wars instead of A New Hope. And and we shot a bunch of it. I think I played Han Solo in it. Which that's a whole thing. But yeah, it's but you reach an age and you go like, "Oh, I don't own this. This isn't mine. I should write my own stuff." Anyway, long story longer. After college, I came out to Los Angeles, which is where I still am, and worked in every job you can imagine in the film industry. I had done some grip and electric work back east on indie films in New York. So that was sort of an easy talent. It was an easy skill to fall back on. And I did that for a bunch of years. I was a first AD. I was a film editor most of my career. I was a film editor for about 30 years, mostly on indie films you haven't heard of. But some of them are good, and some of them are very much not good. Uh, but I was always a writer, and I often hit sort of, I would work on something and it would be a dead end. I ghost co-wrote a couple of Andy Sedaris movies. I don't know if you know who Andy Sedaris is, but he made knockoff James Bond movies that went straight to cable, where the leads were all Playboy playmates. So these R-rated, sexy, violent movies, and Andy took me on as a writing assistant in 90 or 91. Uh, and he sort of just did a brilliant, like, tricked me into writing the scripts for him. I won't tell the whole long version of that story. But like when those two movies were done, uh, he said, I'm going to stop doing this, but I want you to do this now for my son. And I was kind of like, I don't want to do that. Like you were supposed to have me direct the next movie, not your son. That's not right. So, so that was a dead end, and I went back to doing Grip Electric work.
Yeah.
I worked on the Power Rangers first season, after making two movies like that. Um, and then after the Power Rangers, uh, one of the directors of Power Rangers went on to produce a Power Rangers E spinoff called VR Troopers. I wrote 4 episodes of VR Troopers in the mid 90s. Again, did not lead to more writing of television. I think and around that time I started film editing, and that was a pretty good gig. And I liked the film editing is being handed a bunch of unmarked jigsaw puzzle pieces that don't have any images on the front of them, and you have to kind of like,
Yeah.
how does this all fit together? Uh, and after 25-ish years of that, I burned out on that. Um, and I was always still writing. I did a web series in 99. I wrote and directed a karate movie in 1997, which I don't recommend anyone looking up. Um, and then in 2014, after a particularly rough couple of movies, that ended with, producers suing each other and running out of money and all this kind of thing, a colleague read an old script of mine and said, you're a really good writer. I can't help you get this movie made, but I can introduce you to editors in the comic book world, and maybe we can, get you a job writing comics. And at the time, I was willing to try anything, and I always loved comics. And I was introduced to Joe Rybant at Dynamite, and we hit it off at the bar in the Hilton at San Diego Comic Con. I would say that 90% of my career comes from the bar at the Hilton at San Diego Comic Con. Seriously, like,
Yeah.
not just because Dynamite's 65 to 70% of my comics writing career. Even I do a comic with Kevin Eastman called Drawing Blood.
Oh yeah.
I met Kevin Eastman at Emerald City Comic Con, but it was once again at the Hilton at San Diego, where he said, there's something I've been kicking around for like a decade, and I haven't nailed it, and I think you could write it for me with me. So all that to say, that's how I ended up in comics. I wrote one issue of I got a gig writing Legendary Vampirella, which was a spinoff from a Bill Willingham steampunk adventure series that had Red Sonja in it. I think Andraco wrote the Legendary Red Sonja. Somebody else wrote Legendary Green Hornet, and then I wrote Vampirella. And I loved writing Vampirella. She's a great character. And I've been lucky enough to return to her a little bit over the years because she's still, um, it's like a relationship you were in. I, you know, I think of Vampirella as an ex-girlfriend. Like we went out, we had a great time. I'd love to see her again. And the same thing with Red. I've worked on Red Sonja stuff over the years, and she's an ex-girlfriend that I love spending time with and hanging out with one more time. And those characters, Vampirella and Red Sonja, Dynamite has a really nice collection of characters that you can work with. I always kind of whisper when I broke in. I think one of the attractions to the editor in chief at Dynamite, Joe Rybant, is a good friend of mine, uh, was that because of my dad, who grew up reading pulp novels, The Shadow, Doc Savage, The Spider, G8, Operator 5. I knew from all that stuff. And when I met Joe, one of the last things I said to him, they still had the Doc Savage and Shadow license at that time. And I said, I'm one of the only people you can find under 65 years old who's going to be able to write Doc Savage without like running to the Wikipedia page to figure out who the hell he is and who his guys are and what the situation is and all that. So I did end up, one of the first comics I did for them after Legendary Vampirella was uh, a shadow, very strange shadow comic called Twilight Zone, The Shadow, where I had to put the shadow through a Twilight Zone style adventure. But that was great fun. And after that, Doc Savage, Ring of Fire, which was a very, when they said, and I get this a lot from Dynamite, where he said, "Do you want to do Doc Savage?" I said, "I'd love to." And I said, "What are the parameters? Chris Roberson had been writing Doc Savage. Like, do I have to fit into Chris's continuity somewhere?" And he said, "No, no, no, just whatever Doc Savage thing you want to do." And I said, because it's my first time with the character, like I had just done a very meta thing with the Shadow. I was like, can I just do a classic 1930s Doc Savage adventure like Lester Dent wrote it in 1938? Like I'd like to try and recreate that feeling. So
Right.
it's a very kind of Indiana Jones adventure in the South Pacific with volcanoes and submarines and secret weapons and supervillains and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, so that's my path to the present moment. And so I've been writing more and more comics since 2014, and about a year or two into doing it, I was still editing movies. I edited a World War One documentary while I was still doing comics. And I said to my wife at some point that I think I'm missing out on opportunities because I'm editing low budget movies, and I if I spent this time and energy on my writing career, I bet it would go better. you know, I bet if instead of me spending, 60 days a year editing a movie and then like trying to get a comic book job on the side, if I like really applied myself to it, I think I could get more work. And that's essentially how it's worked out. And the irony of, to wrap this all up, the irony of not being able to get arrested as a writer in Hollywood and then going to comic books. And I think this is such a not surprising show business thing. It led to the best film and television work I've ever had. Uh, it wrapped around to about 5 years ago. There's a Red Sonja movie coming out.
Yep.
And an old friend of mine from the comedy world in Los Angeles is Joey Soloway, who was the showrunner on Transparent, excellent writer, filmmaker, whatever, made a bunch of films. And I heard that Joey was looking for comic book people. And the person I had heard that through said, "Yeah, they're doing a lady superhero thing. They won't tell me what it is, but we can set up a meeting and they'll meet with you." And in the 24 hours before my meeting, I thought, whatever year this was, making a Captain Marvel movie. I know who's on that. Wonder Woman's already come out. What is out there that I know is in development? And Joey has a very political edge, very feminist, very politics forward edge. And I was like, who really needs to clean up their act and appeal to feminism right now? And so I go in for the meeting, and as I'm sitting down, it's always good to get a laugh first thing in a meeting. As I'm sitting down, I say, "So I guess I'm here because Bryan Singer doesn't know he's fired yet." And everybody laughed. And the producer in the meeting said, "So you have figured out this is a Red Sonja meeting?" I said, "Yes, I figured out this is a Red Sonja." And I just gotten the cover for a Bettie Page comic where Betty actually turns into Red Sonja. And I showed them that cover. I said, "I am somewhat familiar with Red Sonja." And they were like, "Great." And they hired me, and I worked on that for 2 months.
Oh, wow.
I worked on Joey's pitch, and then it got sold. And then I worked with Joey on the development of the script a little bit. Eventually, Joey dropped out of the project, and then another director took it over. So I doubt very much I'll even appear in a special thanks at the end of that thing. But and then I also am writing now on I mean, the gig has wrapped up, but I've written 5 episodes of Warner Brothers Animation's Bat Wheels,
Let's
which
see.
is a Batman cartoon for kids.
Yep.
A Batman cartoon where Batman never throws a punch
Yeah.
because it's for preschoolers, so everything's got to be very, very people falling backwards into a vat of cotton candy. That is the violence, that you can do on the show.
Yeah.
Cars skidding, and bouncing off a wall. That's the violence on the show. So anyway, but that's the whole crazy. And as you say, I'm still involved in film. I still get the odd acting gig every now and then. So that's the whole picture.
I love it. I love it, David. David, is there a character that you would love, or maybe you've already written a story for, or you just want the opportunity to put it into comics? Do you have one character like, man, if I could ever just write this character, that would be
I
amazing?
I will say I'd love to write Star Trek.
Mm.
And when I say Star Trek, I mean Captain Kirk and Mr. Spock. I never mean anything after that. And I love those other shows. I think a friend of mine is a writer on Strange New Worlds. I just ran into him at a screening last week, and man, I'd kill for that gig. I'd love to write Captain Pike and Mr. Spock as a young man and all that. But I'd like to. I have a Star Trek pitch that I sent to IDW 3 regimes ago, and maybe I'll dust it off someday. And
You should. I think they've been trying to renew some of the
yeah,
excitement around the whole Star Trek
yeah.
IP. So it might be.
But Heather is the editor over there on those, and she has a plan, and she has people for that plan, and someday maybe I'll whisper something in her ear and get somewhere with it. But I'm not holding my breath on that. It is great the stuff that I've been able to do. And the other one, which is ironic because Dynamite has the character, is James Bond. But the older I get, I'm not super interested. And I love James Bond. Favorite character when I was a kid. It's the reason I'm sitting here in a sport coat is that he gave me the impression that this is how adults dress, regardless of the situation. Should always have a sport coat on or a suit or a tuxedo. Um, but the older I get, the less interested I am in writing a boilerplate secret villain builds super weapon and has secret fortress and James like that. I loved those movies when I was a kid, but now I'm way more interested in James Bond as a psychological profile than I am as a. And I'll tell you, I have a pitch that I have every once in a while. Joe says, "Let me look at that again," and it never goes anywhere. But I actually have a pitch, a James Bond pitch called "This Death Is Mine," which is about James Bond's extremely complicated relationship with suicide.
Oh, wow.
Um, well, a friend of mine made this observation, and I was embarrassed because she was new to James Bond and had just read Casino Royale. And I explained and maybe it's because she was new to the character, she could see this right away. I explained the plot of On Her Majesty's Secret Service, and she said, "Oh, he falls in love with Tracy because she's a suicide. She tries to commit suicide, and he saves her. So the reason of all of those women that James Bond falls in love with and marries Tracy is because it's a chance to fix what went wrong with Vesper." And I'm like, that is so good. Like I've been reading these books and seeing the movies for a million years, and I've never heard anybody make that observation before. And Fleming's a better writer, I think, than people give him credit for. And so I have a pitch where it opens with James Bond commits suicide and by taking a bunch of pills, and when they revive him he's like, I was set up. I don't remember what happened, but I was like, do you think I commit suicide by taking a bunch of sleeping pills like a housewife? Like, I put the Walter PPK in my mouth, I jump off a bridge, I drive a car into Parliament. Like, there's ways that I would commit suicide. This
Yeah.
is not the way. But I use it as he's been set up by a villain and yada 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 yada. But I use it as a way of exploring his complicated relationship with Tracy and with Vesper and how that has screwed up his brain and made him self-destructive, made him a guy that a lot of people hate Diamonds Are Forever, and it's one of my favorite Bond movies because Connery is completely checked out. He's he and it the funny thing is it's the only James Bond movie where the lead actor is actually doing his part to save the world, because a lot of people don't know this. He negotiated for $1.25 million, which no one had ever been paid for a movie before, to start a charity to send underprivileged Scottish children to college. It still exists. It's called the Scottish Education Trust or something like that. So he's doing good and literally like saving, children. and he also doesn't care at all about what's going on. And I kind of think like existentially checked out is an incredible way to play James Bond, like as an actor, like thinking it's all a joke and there are no stakes and nothing matters and I could die and who cares? Like that's a great way to play. You should only get guys who are like completely checked out of the job to play James Bond. They're like, I don't, man, who cares? Blow it up. I don't, you know. Anyway, that's those are the two. But I will say, like last year, I got to write for a Planet of the Apes role playing game.
Oh, wow.
Uh, and again, sort of like what I said about Star Trek, I could write for any of the parts of the franchise. That's fine. But I got to write Charlton Heston. I got to write Colonel Taylor, who's one of my favorite characters in science fiction because I think he's really psycho. He's a Rod Serling leading man, and he's very interesting in that way. So I got to write about Colonel Taylor, and then I wrote some stuff that was centered around escape and conquest and all of that. I'm supposed to do more, and I have a feeling like now it's going to be in the Andy Circus verse, but we'll see where it ends up. But yeah, I feel incredibly, I've gotten it right. When I'm writing Bat Wheels, first episode had a scene between Batman and Catwoman. And opening up final draft and hitting character and writing Batman,
Yeah.
that's a moment in your life as a writer where you go, holy shit, I'm writing Bat, like some Ethan Hawke is gonna sit in a studio
Yeah.
and growl these lines into a microphone.
That's
That's
cool.
pretty, that's great. Like
That's amazing.
that's pretty amazing. And I should say the first professional writing gig I ever had in '89, the same friend who's the showrunner on Bat Wheels uh, was the main writer on the Star Wars role-playing game.
Oh, okay.
And that was for West End Games. And I wrote a book for them for their Paranoia game. But the contract was such that there was very little money up front for the book. And I was starving writing that book. And I reached out to Mike and I said, can I do a little job for you guys that'll just throw a couple of $100 my way? And then I'll get back to the Paranoia book. And he said, yeah, how about five? I need 5 pages of short stories for the Star Wars book. So I wrote a 2-page Boba Fett story, two different versions of Imperial First Contact with the Ewoks from the Imperial point of view and from the Ewok point of view. And sort of just like my Star Wars script, there's that thing. Jim Starlin is like this, not to compare myself to one of the greatest writers in comics, but there's that thing where you get obsessed with the mistakes and the gaps in continuity and you go, I'm going to fix this. Jim Starlin wakes up one morning and goes, I'm going to write an issue of whatever Marvel one shot it was. I'm going to explain why Nick Fury hasn't aged. Bugging me that Nick Fury is still like 40 years old when World War II was 30 years ago. So I'm gonna do a thing like that. And it's the same thing. The Star Wars gig was stuff that happens off screen in Return of the Jedi. So like you're watching Return of the Jedi, the Ewoks have all of this cool shit set up suddenly. So and also, the Empire is unconcerned about a vicious tribe of murder bears that lives on their base planet. So I wrote a story about this Imperial planetologist who goes down with the first, three other scientists and four stormtroopers, and they just get the shit beaten out of him by the Ewoks. And he reports back to Darth Vader and goes, "This is a terrible idea. These little monsters are going to be a problem for us someday, and we're going to regret building the base here." And Vader just kind of shrugs them off and says, "They're teddy bears. What the hell is wrong? Like you're a coward and a weakling, and those stormtroopers are idiots. And if I sent 20 men, this wouldn't have been a problem." And the most adult thing I did in that short story, which the publisher cut out, was it was revealed that it was a transcript from a war crimes trial.
Didn't like that one, huh?
The game was not that kind of game. And I was
Yeah.
like, no, it's like clearly after the death of the Emperor, you're going to have Nuremberg trials for all these dudes that did heinous shit for the Empire.
Right.
And the guy who chose Endor's moon is up there on, the Ewoks want that guy's head. clearly. And he's like, no, no, no. I said don't. I said this is terrible. Let's not do it. And then from the other side, Wicket is one of the Ewoks who encounters the Imperial troops, goes back, calls a council, and says, these guys are coming. They're bigger than us. They're faster than us. They have all these crazy death machines that we don't understand. We have to start now preparing. We got to make spearheads that can penetrate that armor. We got to get, how can we knock them unconscious? How can we knock their flying machines out of the sky? How can we trip those big walking monsters that they have? So the idea of like the Ewoks have been waiting for that Rebel Commando team to show up and give them an excuse to go murder bear on the stormtroopers.
I love
Uh, but yeah, the first short story I wrote, which I called Dark Voyage to Tatooine, because I was 22 and not as good a writer as I am now, um, was about Boba Fett coming back to. I figured that once you've got the Han Solo coffee table and you've collected the money from Vader and he's going to get the Jabba the Hutt money, if you're one of those other four bounty hunters who missed Han Solo, you go, well, if I just wait in orbit above Tatooine for Boba Fett to come out of hyperspace, I can jump him, get the Han Solo coffee table, and I'll get at least I didn't get the Darth Vader money, I'll get the Jabba money. So I wrote a short story where IG-88 jumps him in orbit of Tatooine, and they have a space dog fight, and Boba obviously wins and kill. I killed IG-88, which it used to be a canon story, and if you looked in the Star Wars encyclopedia, it said, well, there were three IG-88s because I think two other authors had also killed him. So like people kept killing poor IG-88. I will say I have a friend who does a Star Wars podcast, and he had me on after The Mandalorian came out. And he said, did you notice how the first episode was an IG robot and a Mandalorian guy going at it with each other? And I said, I didn't think of that, but these guys do read all that old stuff.
Oh yeah.
And Lucasfilm did, for whatever reason, pluck that short story out, and there was an action figure blister pack called Battle of the Bounty Hunters, which is a much better title than Dark Voyage to Tatooine, that had IG-88 and Boba in it, and then a two-paragraph version of my short story on the back.
Oh
And
wow.
they also did a pop-up book of it called Battle of the Bounty Hunters.
That's
And the last like 3 or 4 pages were Boba Fett on Tatooine, but the first 8 or 10 were my short story just done as a pop-up book, which is
that's cool.
hilarious. But
That's
anyway, that's the dipping in and out. But I got to write Luke Skywalker. I got to write, Boba Fett and Darth Vader a little bit, and that's I would go back to Star Wars, obviously, in an instant. Especially because, the Tony Gilroy thing, that's his version of me writing a James Bond story about suicide. Like, like I'm going to take this thing that is not generally particularly serious, and I'm going to talk about a serious thing through this character that, like, it's right there. The seriousness is in the original text. I want to focus on that rather than explosions and, babes. You always got to have explosions and babes, in your James Bond thing. And that brings us nicely to Red Sonja
yeah.
Noir,
Yeah.
actually.
Yeah.
Because Joe reached out to me a couple of years ago, actually, and said, "Do you have a Red Sonja pitch?" And I thought about it, and like any professional writer, I think I can write in any genre, and I've written Red Sonja. Um, but I thought, I don't want to particularly compete with all of the people who are great at sword and sorcery and it's a very particular genre, and I've done it. I like it, but I thought, wouldn't it be funny? Red Sonja is generally portrayed as sharp-witted,
Yeah.
but that's never like the focus of the story is never entirely her using her wits. Um, and I thought, let's do a story about how smart she is and how she's a good detective, how she's smart with human beings, how she knows who the threat is and who the threat isn't. Uh, and I decided to take a really classic, well-known, beloved mystery story, which actually just went public domain this year. and plop Red Sonja in it. And and I pitched that to Joe and he liked it. And for various reasons, because of other things we work on, never got around to doing it. And then last year, towards the end of last year, Joe circled back and said, "Do you want to do a Red Sonja one shot?" And I said, "Remember that series idea that I pitched?" I was like, "Can I make it, since it's a one shot, can it be 30 pages instead of 20? Because I can't, this is too complicated. 30 is going to be tight, but 20 isn't unreasonable." And he said, "Yeah, take 30 pages." And then as I was writing it, when I was getting to the climax, I wrote him, I said, 32? He went, "No, no, no, no.
40. Can I get 40?
Don't push your luck, man."
Yeah.
So, but I compressed three characters from the original story into one. Like there were ways to simplify everything, and I took them. Um, and it's one of my favorite books, and there's a great classic movie based on it, and anybody who is familiar with that stuff will catch 100 Easter eggs to the original. For those at home listening who want to guess, the story is called The Crimson Calypso.
Mm.
The Crimson Calypso is a fabulous little statuette of a goddess. Legend has it that it was carved out of the crystallized blood of a demon. And there's a skinny old lady called the Crone who wants it for her collection and will do anything to get it, and has employed various agents and thieves and scoundrels to get her hands on it, and they have all double crossed her. Uh, and a, at the same, a young, beautiful woman comes to Red Sonja and her partner. She has a partner at the beginning to get her help because her beautiful younger sister is going to be sold into slavery by this guy. And Red Sonja's partner agrees to come to the meeting where she's supposed to pay this guy. And the partner ends up dead, and the beautiful young woman vanishes. And somehow this all leads back to the Crimson Calypso, the fabulous artifact that everybody wants. So I think it's pretty transparent what classic mystery story that is.
I love it.
Uh, but as a longtime fan of that writing and that writer, it was fun to play with those tropes in a sword and sorcery way. You know, the uh the king's guardsmen wear copper colored, copper breastplates, so of course they're coppers. It's the we get to use some of the lingo. But yeah, I love Red and I love characters like that, and it was fun to write her that way and put her in that story.
I love that. I love that. I'm really excited. Yeah. For everyone listening, it does come out June 18th. What I'll do, if it's okay, Dave, I'll just pull up the website right now
Sure.
of Dynamite and let's kind of show some of the covers people could get.
Yeah,
There's a lot of really cool stuff.
yeah,
So here it is. This is cover A right here by Leslie Lyrics Lee. Hopefully, I
yeah,
pronounced that wrong. If I didn't, I do apologize. But this is cover A right here, and like most amazing red Sonya covers, looks
yeah,
awesome. Here is the version cover of that, which looks amazing.
yeah.
This
I
one's really cool
And I
too.
love the Linsner cover.
Yeah.
Not that there's anything wrong with the other cover,
Uh-huh.
but the other cover is a basic Red Sonja pinup
Yeah.
cover, and that's great, and that sells comics, and it's awesome, and the art is gorgeous. But I like that the Linsner one, he went to the this is an urban set story. That was one of the other things. Like, this isn't forests and deserts and wizards' castles. It takes place in a Mediterranean style port city, bustling with people and commerce and all that, because those exist in Hyperborea.
Yeah.
So I like that in Linsner's, she's in an alley and she's got
Yeah.
a wound in her leg and a skull. And I really like that. God, I hadn't seen the Frank Thorne one. I guess that's a reprint.
This one is the statue.
Oh, that's the statue.
Yeah,
Okay.
statue that they have right here too. So yeah, I mean, if you love that Frank Thorne version, you could get a statue over at Dynamite Entertainment as well.
And there's a cosplay cover
Oh,
for the
they don't have that on here yet.
yeah, there's a great cosplay cover. And again, she looks kind of tough and beat up in it, and I really kind of love that. It's a really I the cosplay cover is really great.
Yeah, I
So
agree
check
with you.
that
I
out.
think the Linsner cover is my favorite, I think, out of all those. I love that.
Yeah, it's just, again, I can't play favorites because they're all great and they're all serving a different purpose. But I love I love pinup covers, but I really love plot covers. One of the things we did in one of the last Elvira series, I was on the phone with Dave Acosta, who was doing covers for it, and he said, "Let's bring back dialogue balloons on covers."
Yeah,
No one does dialogue
no one
balloons
does
on
it
covers
anymore. I grew up with
anymore.
it.
And we did Elvira in Horrorland. Every single issue had a dialogue balloon on the cover
Love
because, it's just it's fun. It was a fun series to do that with,
it. Yeah.
and it also, so much of Elvira is the jokes that she tells. So
Oh,
like, putting a joke on the cover is always a good idea. But yeah, I will say I have pitched a second issue of Red Sonja Noir.
great.
This is meant to be a one shot.
Yeah.
There's the same writer has a great short story um that I've always wanted to adapt. It's actually it's very similar to Die Hard. It's sort of if Die Hard happened in Malibu or Catalina Island in like a rich
Yeah.
beach community. And it's a great short story. So I sort of pitched the Red Sonja version of that as the next one. And we'll see if they go for it. They may not. Go out there and buy this one and you'll definitely get another. And I will say, like, we had not the Red Sonja Noir thing was a very last minute. Um, one of the I love Dynamite. They are my main employer. But one of the things that drives me crazy is everything having the same title and no differentiation between. Like I did two Bettie Page series that they just called Bettie Page, and people were like, I don't know, I bought issue 4 and then I went back and bought issue 3 as a back issue, and it doesn't connect at all. I'm like, two different,
Two different
completely
titles.
different series.
Yeah.
But so when we were coming up on this, I thought it would be great to brand it in such a way that separated it out from everything else being done in Red Sonja. So I said, well, how about we just try calling this Red Sonja Noir and see if anyone, it was going to be called Red Sonja the Crimson Calypso. And inside the cover, that's still the name of the individual story. But I said, let's try to launch a branding of Red Sonja Noir where she's in stories that take place in cities and that are crime stories, not, I mean, she still lops a lot of heads off in this thing. And the
She's still
villain,
Red Sonja at the end of the day, right?
yeah, and the villain, the crone, is still a sorceress. Like it's still sword and sorcery. It's just what's happening. The story itself has more mystery, hard-boiled detective stuff going on in it. I just thought that would be a fun direction to go with her, uh, where she's smarter than everybody and pushing everybody around. And there's a scene where the coppers accuse her of killing her own partner, and it's just very like that's rich even from you. I'm gonna go find the real killer while you guys stand around with your thumbs up your asses or whatever the clean version of that was I put in the story. Uh, and to me, that tracks perfectly well with the character as she's been written by everyone else since Roy Thomas in the 70s. She's always been like that. I'm just giving her a world in which to be even more like that, and deal with people that way,
I
you know.
I love it. That's amazing, David. I can't wait for this. I am a Red Sonja fan, so I do have quite a bit of Red Sonja comics. I'm a big Conan the Barbarian fan. I love Robert E. Howard. So this is right
Sure.
in my wheelhouse, my friend. And although I didn't grow up with it, I wish I would have grew up with it earlier. I didn't really fall into Robert E. Howard till later in life, but I have really come to really love sword and sorcery, and I love especially like police noirs. There's a lot of really good stuff out there. There's a Dick Tracy title out there from Alex.
Oh, the Alex Segura. Segura is
So
great,
good.
and that is a great book. And
Yes.
I'm not,
Perfect.
I'm a fan of the original versions of
Yeah.
things, but I have no problem
Yeah.
if someone has a good way to go that's not exactly the original way. You're not gonna, you know, it doesn't things don't ruin my childhood.
Yeah.
They really don't. My joke when the 2006 Star Trek movie came out, I would tell people, weirdly, even though I was promised Chris Pine was coming to my house to shred my William Shatner DVDs, he didn't show up, and my wife is pretty disappointed that Chris and Zach didn't show up to shred all of our William Shatner and Leonard Nimoy memorabilia. It's still, and Raymond Chandler, while we're talking about Noir, famous
Yeah.
quote from him. Someone asked him once, "How do you feel about what Hollywood has done to your books?" And he said, my books are right there.
That,
Hollywood hasn't done anything to my books, man. I
yeah.
will say that there's one sort of, it's not a complete violation of that, but those three Hobbit movies, man, really killed a lot of my love of J.R.R. Tolkien, and it's so not his fault. It's
Yeah.
like after I saw the first Hobbit movie, I was like, man, I got to reread that book and remember why this was like one of my favorite things when I was a kid, because this is all the joy and love has
Yeah.
been sucked out of this thing for me. And Rings of Power, I had to say, like, I was like, oh.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think I would enjoy reading the Silmarillion more than this, and I cannot get through the Silmarillion, so
You're
that's
not the
saying a
only
lot.
one, David. Think there's a lot of YouTube videos
Yeah,
out there about those topics for sure.
like I don't, but like I'm one of the outliers. As much as I love Sean Connery and Last Crusade, there's only one great Indiana Jones movie. Like Spielberg's been making subpar Indiana Jones movies for 40 years. I don't, like I'm
Yeah.
not gonna, I'm not gonna lose my shit because Kingdom of the Crystal Skull is bad. And when I saw, I think it was Rise of Skywalker, and someone was like, "What did you think?" I was like, "Well, it didn't make me 12 again,
Yeah.
and I can't." Like that is something that requires a magic potion or a time machine.
Yeah,
I'm
exactly.
never going to be 12-year-old seeing Star Wars again, and that's fine.
Yeah.
My expectations are exactly at the right level to go like, well, this is,
Yeah.
whatever. You know, it's the same thing. The most subpar Star Trek, I always feel like, to me, it's like reading the newspaper. Like I dropped out of Deep Space Nine. It was actually some of it was too consciously edgy for me, which to me is not particularly Star Trekky. I'd probably enjoy it more if I watch it now. But I would dip in and watch an episode, and it was like getting your hometown newspaper and go, "Oh, we're at war with the Dominion. Oh, interesting." Like, "Oh, that's what's going on. Okay, cool." "Oh, the Federation's got a new type of starship.
Yep.
Interesting."
Yeah.
Just like, okay, just checking in on everybody to see how we're all doing, and it's fine, I guess. And
Yeah.
it's these things that were stories when we were a kid because they were limited become environments,
Yeah.
become universes. And that's why the multiverse thing works. I am actually not one of those people that hates multiverse things. I love multiverse things because I love the idea that the whole point of that third Spider-Man movie was it's okay, Andrew Garfield, you're perfectly valid. You're a valid Spider-Man. Don't don't beat yourself up because the movies weren't good.
Yeah.
That's not on you.
Yeah.
You're great. You're fine. Alfred Molina, you're great.
Yeah.
You're fine. We're not forgetting you. We love you. Welcome back. And I think it's a natural going back to Philip Jose Farmer. I don't know if you're familiar with the Wold Newton universe.
I'm not. No.
Philip Jose Farmer is this science fiction writer, kind of a funny oddball guy. And he wrote a biography of Doc Savage called Doc Savage's Apocalyptic Life. Prior to that, he had written Tarzan Alive, a biography of Tarzan that posited that what if Tarzan really lived? What if Doc Savage was a real person? All of that. But he came up with this unified field theory of pop culture characters, very similar. I mean, League of Extraordinary Gentlemen owes a lot to this stuff.
Really.
And the idea is that all these guys are related. They all really existed. You know, James Bond is John Carter's grandnephew. Like I'm exaggerating. And sometimes it's made easy by things like John Carter having the same name as Randolph Carter, the closest H.P. Lovecraft ever got to having an action hero. So it's all kind of like connected. And because writers are lazy and every action hero is 6'2" and has gray blue eyes, it's like, yeah, they're all genetically, I think Captain Nemo
Yeah.
either is turns into Moriarty or he turns into Fu Manchu. I can't remember which he does after he retires from running around with submarines. But it's that kind of thing where everything is all connected. And pop culture makes it easy because when they make movies for this thing, there are only so many actors in the world. So you get there's a guy named Jess Nevins, a really great historian of pulp fiction, the best at it. And he's the guy that wrote the annotations for League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. And he made the third or fourth edition an open source thing on the internet. And we became friends because uh, I sent him some trivia.
Mhm.
For example, when he got to James Bond, M, James Bond's M in the 1950s is Harry Lime, is Orson Welles from The Third Man.
Mhm.
And I pointed out to him, which he had not previously known, that in The Third Man, Bernard Lee, who goes on to play M in the James Bond movies, is a military policeman who Harry Lime murders in the story. So I said, obviously, Alan Moore is suggesting
Yeah.
that that military policeman rose through the ranks to become M
Mhm.
within 10 years because Harry Lime, who was a super genius, murders this beat cop, takes his identity so that he can escape, and then ends up being James Bond's boss 10 years later. Um, that kind of thing only happens because you've got the actors out there.
Yeah.
You know, there's a scene where in his book where James Bond is walking past Q department, and there's an old man with a saggy mustache standing there as the Q division guys are taking apart Chitty Chitty Bang Bang,
Mhm.
which is a funny thing. Ian Fleming wrote Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. The car in Chitty Chitty Bang Bang is kind of the kids' version of James Bond's Aston Martin. It flies, it gives out oil slicks, whatever. But the old actor with the drooping mustache, I'm spacing on his name now, Jeffrey something, played the inventor of Chitty Chitty Bang Bang's dad. He also played Dr. Caver, the inventor of Cavorite, the anti-gravity material that they go to the moon in the movie version of H.G. Wells from the Earth to the Moon. I can't remember what the H First Men in the Moon.
Mhm.
And it's like just because this one character actor played those two parts, you get this really interesting, is that Caractacus
Yeah.
Potts' dad or is that Dr. Caver
All these
standing there?
connections are being made, huh?
You know, it's one of them,
Yeah.
but all that to say, it's very much like Jose Farmer really got that first and said, it's all real, it's all connected, you make the connections, you know, and you can enjoy this world in which these people all know each other. And first one of the first things I ever wrote was a Walt Newton inspired thing. My father and I loved King Kong, the original 1933 movie. The sequel is weak. It's not great. The first movie is one of the greatest movies ever made. The sequel is clearly like, let's just cash in and make this thing as fast as we can. I wrote the first 10 pages of a sequel to King Kong that involves every pulp hero in New York City in the 1930s. And I still want to do it some day. It's called The Morning After Kong.
That would be pretty
It's
cool.
because of these connections. There was a pulp character called G8, and they were supposed to be like normal World War One aviation stories. But in it, the Germans always have like a giant bat that puts out poison gas or a dragon.
Yeah.
So I was talking to my dad when I was a little boy. I was like, "Well, who do you send to shoot down King Kong?" The World War One ace who shot down a dragon that one time. Like that's the guy. So it's G8, the pulp hero, in that plane. Doc Savage has his the last one of the last moments in this prologue to Morning After Doc Savage's office is on the 86th floor of the Empire State Building. So he's like reading the newspaper and the room starts shaking. And one of his assistants comes in and says, Doc, you got to look out the window, man. Like crazy shit's happening out
It's
there.
going down, man. You gotta check this
Yeah.
out.
But all this to say to wrap up this incredibly off-topic digression,
Oh, I love it, David. I love it.
I think when you grow up, I've seen this argument recently on social media about like, in order to be successful financially, you kind of have to own your own
Mm.
comics. You have to own your own stories. Yeah. But it is irresistible to play with the action figures.
Yeah,
It
100%.
is irresistible to write Doc Savage and The Shadow and Zorro. I've written Zorro. Incredible. I've written John Carter at Dynamite. Incredible for 11-year-old me to write John Carter. So you have to do a little, you got to do a little bit of both, you know. I mean, you don't have to. If you want to do creative stuff your whole life, that's great. If you want to do IP your whole life, find another way to bank money because you're not going to get a royalty. You're not, you know, like like we just saw happen with Peter David, who passed away and had very poor health at the end of his life
Yeah.
and had no health insurance, had no nest egg to fall back on, even though he created 1,000 incredible stories using Star Trek, using the Hulk, using, you know,
I
he
mean,
wrote on
that
all those
that is
issues.
my Hulk. My love for Hulk is because of
Yeah.
Peter. Yeah.
Yeah. I'd say he's my favorite. He also wrote, I haven't read all of the new stuff at IDW, but his DC Star Trek comics
Yeah. Yeah.
are top notch.
I
Like
was
he wrote
just
the,
I was just I don't know if you remember this.
oh yeah,
Yes. I mean, there's all kinds of small articles that Peter David wrote through here, really kind of sharing a different side of Peter David that most, I think, comic book fans probably didn't know.
yeah,
And early on, he was, very vocal about writer rights, artist rights, and he really goes into detail, an aggressive way, which is really
yeah,
interesting. But just an amazing creator, amazing
yeah.
writer, and I think a lot of people owe him a debt of gratitude for what he did
Oh,
in the
absolutely.
industry.
And
Yeah,
it's a joke, but I always kind of say this at panels about, making creator-owned stuff.
yeah,
I kind of wish someone came to kids when they play Monopoly for the first time and said, "Pay attention.
yeah.
Working for a living, passing go and collecting $200, you lose the game
Yeah,
if that's all you ever do.
good point.
The guys who invest in real estate and build hotels kill you. And you being a good-hearted Joe just getting your $200 are doomed. You're gonna die with no health insurance and for writers, intellectual property is our boardwalk and our park place and our hotels and our houses and that's what you've got. And all this to bring around to a good final topic, which is I am writing a creator-owned book
Oh,
for
excellent.
Dynamite right now. It's called Two-Fisted Fairy Tales. I don't know when, trying to get them to announce it officially at San Diego,
Oh, okay.
but I don't know if we'll be ready by then. Just got an artist on board for it. And the very quick pitch for it is that this is entirely based on a true story. My writer father was a World War II veteran, as I mentioned earlier. For whatever reason, possibly because he knew who his son was, when I was a little boy, when he read me the classic, or when he told me the classic bedtime story fairy tales, Three Little Pigs, Sleeping Beauty, Goldilocks, Jack and the Beanstalk, etc. He told them to me as World War II combat stories that he had personally experienced
Oh, wow. How cool is
and been a
that?
part of. And I think part of the genius of it is a lot of those stories take place in the Black Forest between France and Germany and Belgium. So, like that, you're already in the Schwarzwald with your tank. You might as well tell the story. So, like, the first issue is Little Red Riding Hood. And the first time I heard, you know how the story ends with the Tin Woodsman comes in, or not the Tin Woodsman, the Woodsman comes in and saves Little Red Riding Hood from the big bad wolf. In the story as I heard it, my dad kicked open the door with a Thompson submachine gun, and
Yeah.
gave it to the wolf with a Tommy gun. Um, the one thing I do that my dad didn't do is it's a continuing narrative. They're not standalone
Okay. Yeah.
stories. The overall story is helping Red find her grandma because he doesn't consume her grandma. She's taken off by the SS for questioning because she and Little Red are in the French Resistance. There's a machine gun in the picnic basket under the bottle of wine and the cheese and the bread. She's actually bringing grandma a Sten gun, a small the machine gun used by resistance forces. So it's that. Uh, my joke pitch for it, in Hollywood, you take two things that are popular and you say it's like that. My joke pitch for it has always been it's Saving Private Ryan meets A Princess Bride. And it does, like, the framing story is 1971 in my suburban bedroom, and it's my veteran father telling me the stories. I get into it. The first scene is, and tr again, true thing that actually is me seeing, the monster in the corner of the bedroom in the dark, and my parents come in and turn the lights on and like, look, no monster. And what kicks off the whole series is I ask my World War II veteran father, "Have you ever seen any monsters?" And he thinks about the question seriously and he goes, I have. I spent 1944 and 1945 chasing monsters all over Europe in an armored car
Wow.
with a squad of wonderful guys. Um, and I use the real names of his squad members and I have pictures of them. So we're drawing them into the book.
That's
Like,
so cool.
it is shockingly, I mean, for all that it's a fairy tale with absurdly false stuff in it, the squad of guys and my dad, that part's all real. Like the World War II parts of it are all weirdly the true story of my father's experience in Northern Europe in, from September of 1944 to April of 1945. So, that's coming. Like I said, I don't know exactly when, but I've written two scripts for it already. We have hired an artist, so we're on our way. So that's one of the next things to look out for from me.
I love it, David. I can't wait for that. I love it. I love
Thank
World
you.
War II and that whole taking some of these stories that have been around for so long and then blending it in a World War II battle. I
Yeah.
think that's
It's
incredible.
it just,
Brilliant.
it's one of those things.
Brilliant.
It's part of my real life, and it's always been something that I thought was funny
Yeah.
that my dad did. Uh, and I've always kind of wanted to do something with it, and I actually started writing it as a screenplay a bunch of years ago. And I wrote the Three Little Pigs. I wrote the Little Red Riding Hood part and most of the Three Little Pigs, and then I went, I don't know what I'm doing with this, and I don't, you know. And then about 3, 4 years ago, I started talking to Joe about it. And could we do it at Dynamite as a creator-owned book? And Dynamite really doesn't do creator-owned books. So it took like a year of actually back and forth of how are we going to set up this deal but it's a really sweet, it means a lot to me that Joe and Nikki Barucci, who runs Dynamite, are taking a chance on this utterly bizarre. There are no superheroes,
Yeah.
it's not a classic horror book. It's not really a kid's book. It's not, there's a lot of machine gun violence in it, and things blown up. And um it's a very unusual book. And I will also say as a disclaimer, this has been in my head so long that I've never read a single issue of Fables.
Oh, because of that.
I
Yeah.
just didn't want to like I didn't want to make any of the same choices Bill did.
Yeah.
If I have done so by accident. You know what I mean? Because they're the same characters. Because I got big bad wolves all over this thing. I got the Three Little Pigs. I got Goldilocks. I got Sleeping Beauty.
Yeah.
I got all those characters. I don't know what he did with them. I'm doing what I'm doing with them. And we'll have, fun with them in that way. But yeah, I didn't want to when I've got like right now it's scheduled to be a 5 issue miniseries. I have two additional 5 issue miniseries plotted out if this one is wildly successful. We'll see.
Yeah.
Maybe after I've done all those, I'll go back and read Fables because I'm told it's very good.
It's
But
extremely, it's extreme. I mean, you got a lot of reading to do, but
yeah,
it's
there's a lot.
I mean, Bill is just an amazing writer, so it's really, really good, very
I'll
good.
tell you my favorite joke that he did in Legendary, because
Please.
it was all of the Dynamite licensed characters as part of a steampunk universe, and
Mm,
that included Steve Austin. And steampunk, even though it took place on what was eventually revealed to be another planet, it's another planet with like late 19th century, early 20th century values and technology and whatever. And there's a scene where Steve Austin, who is disabled and in a wheelchair, and Oscar Goldman are boarding a Zeppelin, and there's a trunk with all their gear in it that's being brought on board. And Oscar Goldman says, careful with that. The stuff in that trunk is worth $6,000. And the idea of doing like 1898 Steve Austin is the $6,000 man is very fucking funny to me.
It's
That is
super funny.
like I would have done an entire book just to get to that one single joke of he's the $6,000 man. Um, and then I think they did some great stuff with $6 Million Man, and now the license has returned to wherever it came.
Oh, it
But
did. Yeah.
but yeah,
Oh, wow. Well, David, I cannot wait for Red Sonja Noir, June 18th in your comic book shops. And I
yes.
also cannot wait for this new title that you're working on, your own creator,
Two-Fisted Fairy Tales.
Two-Fisted Fairy Tales. I love it. I love it.
Thanks.
Well, David, I can't tell you how much of a pleasure it is to meet you. I'm
Oh,
hoping
thank you.
when Fairy Tales comes out, we could have you back.
Oh, absolutely.
I would
That'd be
love to
great.
talk about it, and I cannot wait to get my hands on those first 5 issues at least, and hopefully 15. But
Fingers crossed.
yeah, congratulations on all your success. It was a pleasure
Thank you.
being able to meet with you today, and yeah, everybody get out to your comic book shops June 18th, coming up real quick. Red Sonja Noir, another amazing story for Red Sonja.
Oh, one thing that
Yeah,
I
please.
feel bad. The
Yeah,
art is by Edu Mena, and he did an amazing job, and it's gorgeous. And Joe suggested him to me because Edu did, I think he drew both of my John Carter stories in Savage Tales, and did a great job. And I loved working with him. And so that's I don't want to be that guy and not mention the amazing artist on the book who did such good work.
I love that. I love that. Very important. Very important. I'll make sure that the artist, obviously you, all your socials, everything will be below. And
Great,
I'll even put the link to the Dynamite site. That way you
great.
could take a look at the covers that are available. But yeah, get out there June 18th and pick this up. David, thank you so much for spending some time with
Thank
me.
you for having me, Tommy. It was great talking to you.
It was a pleasure. Thank you, my friend.
You're still here? It's over. Go home. Go.